Hello, my name is Anna Barker, and I am the speaking voice from the wilderness of long, thick tomes of literature. Those of you who know me, we've gone through many a tome since 2020. The pandemic happened, and everyone just disengaged from each other, and I felt this is my opportunity to engage everyone in reading long books. So those of you who have been with me for a while, welcome back. Those of you who are new to the process, welcome. The way all this works is I comment on a UNESCO, Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature site, and I double post on Substack. We read big books. And this fall, we happen to be going through Crime and Punishment. And this is the book that I've been using a lot. It's falling apart completely, but I've taught it so many times. And I'm teaching it again in my class, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, next spring here at the University of Iowa. So far we've gone through everything from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Paradise Lost, to the Decameron, to Les Miserables, Madame Bovary, Anna Karenina, War and Peace, Brothers Karamazov, and a few shorter works. And it has been like The Red and the Black. We do some French literature. Definitely, we are huge fans of Alexandre Dumas. We've gone through The Count of Monte Cristo, and we are on a 3-year summer journey with The Three Musketeers. So why Dostoevsky now? Because Tolstoy is going to be 200 in 2028, and we need to fill our days with meaning until we celebrate Tolstoy for a year. So in 2021, and I have the programs here actually, in 2021, I was the curator of this exhibition at the University of Iowa dedicated to all things Dostoevsky, because in 2021, he was, hello, in 2021, he was 200. And we celebrated an entire year. We had so much fun celebrating with Dostoevsky. The exhibition covered all of his works from the very beginning, from inception, from Poor Folk, all the way to his final novel, Brothers Karamazov. So much of what I give you this fall has been acquired during my research. And to put together an exhibition like this, that was 3 hours, I wish, 3 years of painstaking work. The last 2 years, just meticulous assembly of all of the material and all of the information we needed to make this exhibition both comprehensive and accessible. So it was a gift to those readers who have been reading Dostoevsky for years and who have been appreciating him for decades, but also an invitation to Dostoevsky for those who have never read his books before. And I think we succeeded. We had over 6,000 visitors in 4 months, and it was just amazing. So much of what I do with you this fall is revisiting just Crime and Punishment in the context of all of Dostoevsky's previous writing. And so far, so good. So we actually last night I listened to my entire talk on here. Just a second. I just need to do something here. I can't get the light quite right. Just a second. Sorry, it has gotten like so, it's getting dark earlier, and I did not expect just how dark it's going to be at 4 o'clock. So I think I can see you now. Yes, so I re-listened to my talk from last spring when we were finishing the Charming Rotten Scoundrels books. And my talk was the second part of the Charming Rotten Scoundrels, where we talked about Lermontov's Hero of Our Time and Turgenev's Fathers and Sons. And I realized I was very enthusiastic. I had a lot of energy. It was the beginning of summer, so we were all like tanned and happy, and the days were long, and our joy was boundless. But it's amazing to what extent I stressed that we'll have to revisit over and over again just one book, and that book is this one from my lovely pile here, Fathers and Sons, and to what extent Fathers and Sons of Turgenev is the foundation of the pile of books that I have right here to my right, next to the candle. And that pile is actually at the very bottom is Notes from Underground. On top of it is Crime and Punishment, then The Idiot, Demons, The Adolescent, and Brothers Karamazov. So that is the progression where we are headed right now. Why? Because that is the progression of Dostoevsky post-Siberia. And if Notes from Underground was his response to Turgenev's Fathers and Sons, all of the other novels engaged with Turgenev's Fathers and Sons in a sort of a continuum of exploration, what it means to be a human being in the 19th century. So the joke is that Russians defeated Napoleon in 1812 and spent the rest of the 19th century trying to figure out the meaning of life. And it's so true. And so the novels of authors like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Turgenev before them are deeply introspective novels. And I'm finding that from just your commentary and from the lack of commentary and from the bewilderment of the readers, I'm realizing that Dostoevsky asks so much of us in Crime and Punishment. He asks us to live in the presence of a character who is deeply unappealing, but at the same time deeply appealing. He did not create a monstrous character that we can't relate to in Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov is an extension of Dostoevsky. So to the same extent, when we were reading early in September, Notes from Underground, and we had a hard time relating to the underground man, Dostoevsky does not ask less of us with Raskolnikov. The underground man is a completely obnoxiously unrelatable. At the same time, we start understanding Notes from Underground only when we realize that the underground man is an extension of us too. When we all of a sudden say to ourselves, yeah, I absolutely hate this guy, but I've done this too. I've been mean to people. I've been trying to self-assert myself in a world that does not need me or want me or relates to me. I've been a person who wonders about the continuum of it all and asks the question of the presence of my volition in a world that imposes its own will on me. And Dostoevsky continues that quest for the understanding of what it means to be a human being in the 19th century, or to be a human being, period, in Crime and Punishment. So when we were talking about Notes from Underground, and I was saying that the concepts that he explores in Notes from Underground will be revisited in Crime and Punishment, to the point where Raskolnikov is an evolution of the character of the underground man, and Sonia Marmeladova is an evolution of the character of Lisa in Notes from Underground. It's a very difficult leap for readers to go from a slender novel that is only what, and you know, I have it somewhere here. The fact that it fell apart into parts 1 and 2 is haunting me now, because I'm having a hard time reassembling it. So yes, so tiny little slender tome of Notes from Underground, which contains part 1 and part 2, which just, it was pure accident of fate that it fell apart into 2 sections. So here's slender little book. So it's hard for us to go from the 100-page examination of what it means to be human to the 650-page examination of what it means to be human, spending our time in the presence of characters who are really hard to relate to, very, very hard to relate to. And so that's why my commentary takes us to other authors who have dealt with the gutter of the big metropolis. So this is definitely a post-industrial revolution novel, a world where people come from the provinces, from the countryside. And it's amazing, all of these characters that we encounter in Crime and Punishment, they've come from provincial life. Isn't that amazing how, like, Razumikhin tells us that he has come from the provinces. Raskolnikov's mother and sister are coming from the provinces. So obviously Raskolnikov did not grow up in St. Petersburg. He came from the provinces. Even his wonderful housekeeper, who asks him at the very beginning of novel, why don't you do stuff? And Raskolnikov says to her, well, I do stuff. And she says, what do you do? And Raskolnikov says, I think. And I work, I think. And for her, it's completely ludicrous. But she's a peasant woman from the provinces, and she has that kind of worldly wisdom of, work means there's a quantitative aspect to it. It's just something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the end result is it's work well done. In her case, it's a clean room. But at the same time, there's a deeply spiritual aspect to what she does, because yes, she works for the landlady. Yes, she cleans Raskolnikov's room. Yes, she thinks that he's a complete lost idiot because he cannot earn enough income with his brilliance in order to pay for a lousy room that he's occupying. And the landlady is reporting him to the police, which really alerts him, because it's fascinating how he is worried that the police is going to be after him because of the mental stuff that is happening in his head. I mean, that's his work, right? And his work is his mental anguish. And so even before the murder is committed, he's worried that he is going to be hauled into the police for thought crime. And that's exactly what is happening to him. I mean, he is thinking of things that a criminal. And so he's worried that it'll be revealed. But at the same time, that same servant woman, Nastasia, she brings him tea, and he says, "Is that from the landlady?" And she says, "No, that's for me. It's my like used up tea." And do you see how her practicality about, scolding him for not doing something to better his position in life, which would be so easy for him. He could get lessons, he can teach kids, he can publish, he can translate. I mean, Razumihin is just full of brilliant ideas how to make money. And he's very smart. I mean, he's very, very smart. He's a published author also. So many opportunities for making money. Nastasia, the servant woman who came from the provinces, is saying, why didn't you do something with like all of your smarts? That's the practical aspect, right? But at the same time, she gives him tea, her own tea, because she feels sorry for him. So all of the characters in this novel exist on the sort of this complex interplay between the quantitative aspect of life and the spiritual aspect of how we relate to life. And Dostoevsky asks us to be completely cognizant that every single character exists both in the practical world, in the real world of the great metropolis, which St. Petersburg is, that gobbles up lives. It's amazing to what extent we hear about suicides all the time. Like Raskolnikov stands on the bridge and this woman jumps into the canal and she's fished out later. And in just sort of like the noise of the street way, we find out that this is not her first time. And then Marmeladov is crushed by a cart. So the city claims a victim each time. It's just this giant, monstrous being, the great Leviathan, that constantly consumes human lives. And Raskolnikov is screaming amidst this huge mass of humanity that he is unique, that the city should not claim him as just a nameless, faceless entity that contributes to the machinery of its existence, that he is a unique individual. And his desire to prove that he's not a piano key in this giant, and I'm quoting the Underground Man, because the Underground Man goes on this long rant saying that I'm a human being. I'm not a piano key. It's fascinating how Dostoevsky will revisit that quote in his novel Demons, where one of the characters will, there's a police raid on his library, and all of his stuff is hauled away in a wheelbarrow covered by an apron. The humor and the hilarity of that is pretty staggering, because he lives in the countryside. And so he shows up at the police station and says, "I'm a citizen, I'm not a splinter." And so that just sort of like stuff is done onto us as human beings. We are splintered into like myriad of humans who are all made of the same tough wood, but at the same time splintered into myriad of ideas. And Raskolnikov just wants to insist that he's not going to be consumed by the metropolis. Is he suicidal sometimes? Yes. And Dostoevsky characters do get suicidal. And this is just a preview of the coming attraction in this reference of the woman who jumps in the water and the fact that it happens to her all the time. So we are in a world where to be uniquely individual and to be a human being is an impossibility. And Raskolnikov is hell-bent, like literally hell-bent, to prove that he is uniquely qualified to be not just a human being, but a human being above human beings, that he does not want to be eaten up by this machine. And it's fascinating, like about being eaten up by the machine. The New York Times was very critical about the scene in the ballet when Marmeladov is crushed by the cart, and they thought it was too clunky. What they did in the ballet was phenomenal. I mean, the entire set consists of like 3 walls, 2 chairs, 1 table, 1 bed. That's all you need to reconstruct a novel of ideas. It's not about the sets. It's about the philosophy of what happens in the mind of one of the characters. And as he's crushed by the cart, just the 2 walls of the set collide on the spot where he stood, and then we see him prostrate on the floor. I just thought it was so brilliantly done that the walls of the city themselves crush Marmeladov as an individual. So that crushing of a human being in the metropolis, Raskolnikov, one, not only does he not want to be one of these splinters, one of these piano keys that the city, the metropolis can press, and then, it gets the result, but he wants to enforce his will onto others. I mean, his volition is paramount to who he is as a character. And it's fascinating how in Notes from Underground, the Underground says at one point, well, I would like to be good, but they won't let me. And this sort of metaphysical, they won't let me. It sounds like, a quintessential teenager. You just, telling them, be good. No, I can, they won't let me. And so this enforcing of will, despite the crushing of physical space. And Dostoevsky underscores that with Raskolnikov so much, because he literally describes his apartment as a coffin. And so the physicality of the claustrophobia of Raskolnikov's life is then extended into the claustrophobia of his thoughts. He is as much of a splinter as a splinter can be. He is a splinter of a human being screaming that he's a citizen, but he does not want to be a citizen. He wants to be a leader. He wants to assert his will to the point of others recognizing that he asserted his will. And this assertion of will is essential for Raskolnikov as a character. That's why it's so hard for us to relate to him, because we understand that this is no way to live, that if you are going to stand away from humanity, if you are going to separate yourself, and if you're going to divorce yourself from human beings to the extent that Raskolnikov divorces himself from human beings, you're going to be in so much trouble. But there's this incredible balance that we need to find between us being unique and uniquely human and uniquely individual, but at the same time fitting into this larger scheme of life that is so unwelcoming to our individuality. And with Dostoevsky, he creates characters that are so, I mean, that's what I mentioned actually in my talk when we were still talking about Fathers and Sons last spring. I said that students often tell me, love the novel, this is so fantastic. Everyone, I mean, all the main characters are always in their 20s. That's why students relate to Dostoevsky so much. And some of the comments that you wrote to Crime and Punishment is, everyone is so young. Yes, everyone is incredibly young in all of these novels, because these are novels of ideas, and young people tend to be just full of them. As we get older, we just, temper our enthusiasm for ideas, and we just want to like acquiesce to peace and calm and tranquility. That's not happening when you're 20. You are full of ideas, and you want everyone else to know that you have these ideas. But also the students tell me that, but all of these crimes in his novels, they're just so implausible. And so I always tell them the whole point of Dostoevsky is that crime is the only actual thing that is real in the novel, because Dostoevsky was a newspaper man. I mean, he published in Epoch, he published in Time, the 2 magazines that he published with his brother Mikhail. And then all his life, he published this collection of his translations, his essays, his shorter fiction called The Writer's Diary, which is invaluable source of Dostoevsky information. But he would learn about these unusual crimes. People don't really axe murder other people all that often. And so he found out, and he goes, and it's fascinating how this book that I suggested that you read, called The Sinner and the Saint, is actually about a Frenchman who committed this heinous crime with an ex. Guess what he was reading when he would contemplate his crimes? Rousseau. He would like read things like The Social Contract, and he would really think about what it means to be a human being in society that is not allowing you to assert your identity, individuality. So like this French guy murdered people while reading The Social Contract. And so like these philosophical murderers, Dostoevsky would just take this very strangely, uniquely weird murder and bring it to the sphere of universal human condition. And he does this in every single novel. So we are going to encounter criminality in The Idiot, we'll encounter criminality in Demons, Adolescent, Brothers Karamazov, and Brothers Karamazov is based on a crime. It's and the murder and various other criminalities that happen in Brothers Karamazov destroy the entire community and destroy every single individual who is engaged in this communal self-annihilation. But with Crime and Punishment, there's this strange crime, and so we are wondering just why should we even relate? I mean, this person is so incredibly unappealing. But Dostoevsky creates a character who is appealing. And we keep reading, even though we just can't stand the fact that we are reading. We couldn't stand reading book one, because by the time we got to book one, the end of book one, we are wondering, I just cheered on a murder. I mean, it's just the way book one is constructed, every step of the way, we are cheering for the murder to happen. And we want him to exit his apartment unnoticed. We want him to go past the landlady's apartment unnoticed because he owes her money. And so if she were to stop him, the conversation would be very long. He has a very narrow window opportunity to give a murder to pawnbroker because he found out that her sister Lizaveta is going to be gone. And it's fascinating how in book one, he goes on this long walk and he exercises that demon. He feels that he does not have to commit murder in order to self-assert himself, which is like, oh, thank goodness. And we as readers just sort of feel like relieved where we are walking back to, and then he says, it's amazing because he could have taken the shortcut to his apartment. But for some reason, for some mysterious reason, he was taken on a long walk past the Haymarket Square, where he, of course, overhears this conversation where Lizaveta commits to going to see these friends at the time when Alena will be all alone. What pushed him to go on a long detour to get to his apartment? At the moment when inside his soul, he committed to not doing anything drastic to assert his individuality. And so I gave you the quote that Mitya Karamazov will say in Brothers Karamazov later on, that the devil and God are fighting for human beings, and the field is the human heart. I mean, that goes back to the book of Job, because in the book of Job, in the biblical book of Job, it's a competition between the seducer, the wicked one. In Russian, there's a wonderful word for that, lukavy. So that there's the wickedness of darkness and the uplifting nature of the divine, and this constant struggle for the human soul. Dostoevsky absolutely was in awe of the book of Job, the biblical Job, who is tested beyond human endurance by a power that is there to deprive him of his faith. And this battle is happening in Raskolnikov, and this battle is so profound, is so pronounced. And so we are on the receiving end of like 500 pages of this battle. And so he overhears, he's pushed into this situation where he says, there's a reason why I didn't take the shortcut. There's a reason why I went on a detour. There's a reason why I was there at the moment when I found out that Lizaveta is going to be gone, and Alena will be alone. And so then in his feverish mind, he feels that he has to assert himself. as a person of free will by committing murder. And we are just like, what the heck? This is just so unbelievable. And then we, people who don't believe in committing murders on a daily basis in order to assert our individuality, we cheer him on every step of the way. We are like so happy when he steals the axe unnoticed. We're happy when he enters the building unnoticed. And then he realizes that he committed murder with a door wide open. And so then he finds, he thinks to himself, wow, I'm so smart. I'm actually wiping my bloody hands on a red rag. That's like good thinking. That's so rational. And then that rationality is negated by the fact that he couldn't even steal. He steals some stupid trinkets while there was a lot of money still left in the apartment. And then, of course, he comes out and he sees Lizaveta standing in complete horror. And so what does he do? He kills her as well. The door still open. And so then he shuts the door, and then the tug of war between the customers who are coming in and him, and he's just standing there ready to murder them if they enter. But of course they feel that there's something amiss there. They keep knocking. The door is obviously not locked. There's just a latch, which means there's someone inside. So one of them goes to get the apartment guard. The second one gets frightened, also goes down. Raskolnikov has enough time to slip away, and there's one empty apartment. But just think, if there would have been no empty apartment, he has no place to run. But there just happens to be an empty apartment, and he runs into it, stands behind the door. And that's the apartment the painters are painting. And they just happened to have quarreled and boisterously ran out all the way down the stairs, yelling at each other. So it happens to be empty just at that moment. Raskolnikov stands behind the door. That's where he drops one of the little packages. And then he walks out. Nobody sees him because by then everyone is trying to figure out what's happening at Idona's. And he walks out without the guard seeing him. And he even replaces the axe without anyone seeing him at his apartment building, and the deed is done. Whew, we're so happy. Yay. And then what Dostoevsky does to us is he makes us the chorus of condemnation during Raskolnikov's nightmares. So he has 3 nightmares. The first one is the whipping of the horse, which is a foreshadowing of the murder. And that whipping of the horse to death is horrific. And actually, Dostoevsky witnessed such a whipping of the horse on his way when he was 16 years old. His mom just died. Pushkin died. It's a traumatic year in Dostoevsky's life. He's moving from Moscow to St. Petersburg to go to the military engineering school. And at one of the post stations, he witnesses the whipping of a horse that will never abandon him. And this is around the time when he starts having epileptic fits. So a lot has happened in that moment where the greatest author that he worshipped so much, Pushkin, and who will be revisited over and over again in all of his works, died in a duel. His mother died. He's moving from Moscow to St. Petersburg. His relationship with his father is very complicated. And so that whipped horse is just like another one of those added horrific moments in his life that he witnessed at a time of severe psychological pressure. So that becomes the foreshadowing. And then we have 2 dreams of Raskolnikov reenacting the murder. And at that point, where we were sort of the very willing witnesses of the murders during the actual event, we start withdrawing into a chorus of condemnation. It's fascinating. He realizes the door is open and all of us, the viewers, are standing on the stairs. And so the fact that the murder was committed with the door ajar makes it a public murder, makes it a public murder committed in the presence of an audience. And the publicity of the murder will require publicity of closure. And so at one point, and I'm going to point out this moment, we're getting close to it, getting very close to the resolution of the novel. And I'm going to point out to you this public event that Raskolnikov will engage in, because the murder was so public, even though there were no witnesses, but there were witnesses. Remember in Notes from Underground when the underground man says, well, let me keep addressing you as dear readers, because, I will obviously will have no readers. So I'm just going to address you as dear readers because it's a literary device that I use in order for me to start you to keep writing. And so that's when I tell my students, guess what? We don't exist. We're just a literary device invented by the underground man. So this presence of an audience is very much though a part of Dostoevsky's writing. And just think to what extent all of these mass scenes that he compresses all the characters into one tiny space, like in that tiny space can be Raskolnikov's coffins. It's like, it's so boundlessly expendable. And the notion of limitations of space and expendability of space is very theatrical for Dostoevsky. Remember, Dostoevsky is a dramatic writer, Tolstoy is an epic writer. So if you want to understand the scope of Tolstoy's writing, let's say in War and Peace, you need to read the Iliad at some point to appreciate just the breathlessness that Tolstoy engages in War and Peace, where he goes from, the emperors and the czars to the lowliest of peasant, the same way as in the Iliad, we see the reaction of the gods to what is happening between humans, and we see kings and heroes, and then we see the lowliest of soldiers. So that whole vertical expansion of space and expansion of characters. For Dostoevsky, it's very horizontal expansion of place, and it's very dramatic. He loved Shakespeare. And so the drama of what happens to human beings when they engage in public debate, but they also engage in public denunciation of their own selves. And it's, that we are at the funeral scene right now in book 5. Or the memorial meal after the funeral, and people are behaving very badly in public, and it is just so catastrophic. And the question students always ask me, we don't really do this in public, and I'm like, just think of what happened last Thanksgiving at your family, and like, oh yes, yeah. So I always tell them, just don't behave like Dostoevsky characters at Thanksgiving. So it's amazing how this public visibility, like we always feel that we're witnessing something on a stage, and the cinematic aspect, the theatrical aspect of Dostoevsky is there because he's a very dramatic writer. And so Raskolnikov's closet becomes like expandable, and we see people coming in and going out. We see this like motion of human beings. When Sonishka Marmeladova comes, it's such a shock, and and all of their reasonings are so goofy. It's like, no, she can't sit on the bed. That would be awkward. But like, she's a prostitute visiting him. I mean, that's in and of itself is awkward, but their reasoning is like, nope, don't put her in the bed. That would be awkward. And how to introduce her to mom and sister? And mom, sister, here's a prostitute. Her name is Sonia. I mean, Dostoevsky is funny because he explores like the nuance of the goofiness of how we interact with other human beings. So sort of this public-private nature of everything that happens, and the fact that we do witness the murder, and the murder was committed with the door wide open, which means it's an opening to not just us, the audience, but it was a public expression of him severing himself off from humanity. And he does the severing himself off from humanity in full view of the world, like the world is always watching. And you're realizing in this novel, in the big city, somebody's always watching and somebody's always listening. And people keep secrets, and secrets are revealed, and secrets are exposed in such a catastrophic way. And so big city, people mingle, people eavesdrop, people listen, people know secrets about each other. Murder is committed in full presence of the world. And then we, the world, become the condemnation chorus that views Raskolnikov externally, and we are the same people who cheered him on every step of the way, but now we are condemning him as he is having his 2 nightmares. He would love to confess. He is just he wants to confess, not necessarily because he wants to admit to his guilt, but he wants to confess because it was the perfect crime. It's just like he committed the perfect crime and nobody knows. That is really weighing on Raskolnikov. So he goes back to the apartment. Do you remember how I mentioned pay attention to the sound of the bell? And it's amazing that the sound of the bell means so much to him. It's like lodged in his psyche as the sound associated with his moment of transgression against his own humanity. And it's either a haunting sound or a triumphal sound of him triumphing over his inhibition against the transgression of murder. He comes back to the apartment, and it's as if he's saying, like, I did it. Just look at me. All of you, like the readers, the dear reader, they know, but I want everyone to know. I want the public accolade of me who transgressed against the silly little people who live in their dark little coffins and never transgress. All of them are willing piano keys in the machinery of the big metropolis. I am not. I am above them all. And Porfiri is a fascinating character because he reads his little treatise. I mean, Raskolnikov is so detached from humanity, he doesn't even know that he's a published author. And I find it so humorous because now that I publish my monthly columns in the Press Citizen, I completely understand. It's like, run and pick up a paper. It's like my photo, my name, my photo, and my waving arms, right? The writing extension of this. And for the longest time, I didn't publish anything. And, I would just like literally tell my students, I don't want to ever see my name in print because Raskolnikov. So for me, this is a very, very personal step. But Raskolnikov willing to share his thoughts with humanity, it's a fascinating act. It's a fascinating act of him willing to go out there into the public to let them know what's in here. It's a terrifying act because you're sharing something that is very intimate, very private, but at the same time, very possibly revelatory against you. It's something that people can use to condemn you because as long as, do you remember how terrified he is before the murder is even committed when Nastasia tells him that the landlady wants to report you to the police and you have to go to the police, and he's terrified because the crime has not been committed yet, so he's just terrified that they'll know what is in his mind. But he wrote that and he submitted that. So now there's this battle between public and private persona of Raskolnikov and how often does Razumikhin say, oh, my relative Porfiri, the investigator, is so curious about you. I may have been talking too much, but he's just so curious about you. Oh, yes, I've been talking too much again, but he's so curious about you. And we're starting to wonder, like, why is he so curious about Raskolnikov? He read the little article. So Raskolnikov is all in his mind and all of his thoughts. He shares them with us, dear readers, right? But then we find out that other people in St. Petersburg were already aware of what he was writing. And his great thing is he has a split in his own soul between just being like everyone else and being above everyone else. And in order to be above everyone else, you need to sever yourself from human beings. And how do you sever yourself from human beings? You commit a transgression against your own humanity. And in his case, this transgression coincides with his desire to murder one woman, and then accidentally he murders two. And I told you that the placing of the axe during the murder is very important because when he commits the first murder, he murders Alona with the blunt side of the axe. And so if this is the sharp side of the axe and this is the blunt side of the axe, he bludgeons her with the dull side of the axe. And students always tell me, that is gruesome. And yes, I mean, it would require so much more force to crush someone with the blunt side of the axe. But the most important thing of that murder is that the sharp side of the axe is pointing at him. And that is so important because in that act of murder, he violates himself. He commits violence against his own immortal soul. He is condemned to be an unredeemable sinner. So the second murder, the inadvertent murder of the holy fool, Lizaveta happens with the sharp side of the axe, but beyond the first murder, he is irredeemable. And that irredeemable nature of his crime, where the blunt, the sharp side of the axe is pointing at him, he condemned his immortal soul to damnation for all eternity. So how do you come back from that? And that is the whole point of the novel. And we have all of these incredibly complex secondary characters. Marmeladov, who is, so he's like one of the original characters of the novel, because Dostoevsky wanted to write a novel about drunk people in the city. It's fascinating. He shares that with Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman's first novel was about alcoholism in New York City. Just fascinating subject of to what extent the big city destroys souls. And the one way you cope with it is through a huge amount of drinking. And it was a novel of Walt Whitman that we were not even aware of. I think it was just published recently because it was found and it was released as one of the early examples of writing of Walt Whitman. And it's fascinating, Dostoevsky and Walt Whitman are contemporaries. And also man living in big cities, deeply interested in what happens to human soul in the big metropolis. So that's Marmeladov. And then Razumihin is just so hilarious. I mean, he tells Raskolnikov, dude, there's so many ways of making money in the city. And Raskolnikov is like, look how poorly you live. It's like, it's because I don't really care about making too much money in the big city. But just think, we could do like all of these translations. The woman's question, we're going to translate this treatise, is a woman a human being? And of course, it doesn't matter if she is or she is not. It pays money. And then it's just so hilarious, because then he says, and once we publish this treatise about a woman being a human being, we'll write about whales. And it's just like he's going through the entire repertoire of progressive writing. We have to save the woman as a human being, and we need to save the whales. And Razumihin is hilarious because he knows what sells, precisely because he lives in the environment of progressive publishing. And the reading public in the big metropolis is interested in progressive ideas. So he is so cynical because he says, I live in the big city and I know what the readership of the big city is interested in, which is women's rights and natural conservation. So we are going to publish this stuff. We don't have to believe in it. Like, trust me, it's going to be so easy on you. I'm not going to require your like conversion of your soul to the cause, because I don't believe in the cause either. But we can make money. And he just gives him like precise amount of money they're going to be paid per page of publication. So Razumihin, and his name means razum is mind. He's a practical thinker. Just like these are conditions that we live in. We don't have to believe in how we make money, but making money off of things that sell is a smart way to go about in this world. And I love all of the poking and provoking that Raskolnikov does with Razumihin, calling him a Romeo, because he sees Dunichka and he's smitten, completely smitten. And then Dunichka is a fascinating little sister, not meek and mild and tender. Raskolnikov shouts at her and says, I will not allow you to marry Luzhin. I will not allow you to ruin your life on my account. And Dunichka is like, well, I am a big girl, and if I want to ruin my life on my account, then I'm going to ruin my life on my account. It's like the perfect conversation between siblings, you know, like, you're not doing this for me. Well, why do you assume that I'm doing this for you? If I want to do it for myself, I'm a big enough kid to do it for myself. But you're like, you're ruining yourself. Well, no, but I'm not ruining myself for your sake. I'm ruining myself for my sake because I have free will. So that's basically the whole conversation between Dunichka and Raskolnikov, which is hilarious. And some of you are starting to wonder, like, she's an interesting character. She's a very interesting character. And you have to remember that Dostoevsky believes that women do have free will, and the women are human beings indeed, because they're agents of free will. So Sonia makes choices and Dunya makes choices, and there are no fainting violets. There are no damsels in distress. And so the whole the whole complexity of a character like Dunichka, just you wait. All I have to say is like, if she has delighted you so far, be prepared to be amazed by her. Mama is also fascinating. When Raskolnikov is reading her letter, we think like, oh, Mom, could you infuse your son with more guilt? I mean, like, he did not need to get that. We're doing everything for you, and I mean, look at us, we're sacrificing so hard for you letter. But at the same time, she's very clever. I mean, she is very smart. Like when she's in St. Petersburg, she puts two and two together, and she tells Luzhin what she thinks of him to his face, which is amazing. Watch out for Luzhin too. His name means puddle. Luzha in Russian is puddle. He's the puddle dude. So fascinating developments with him too. Porfiri, we still don't know much about him. So Porfiri is definitely a work in progress. Katerina, the stepmother of Sonichka, that moment where Sonichka goes and sells herself because there's nothing else to feed the family. And then Katerina takes the family shawl and covers Sonichka with the shawl and kisses her feet and stays by her all night. That scene. I mean, my students often tell me, Anna, I cannot process that. I just cannot process that. And so Dostoevsky definitely takes us there to just how complicated human beings are and can be. But then most importantly, we have St. Petersburg itself as a character in the novel. And Dostoevsky learned the writing of a city into the novel from the best. I mean, definitely Charles Dickens, because Charles Dickens creates, I mean, in The Tale of Two Cities is both London and Paris, but in novels like David Copperfield or Oliver Twist, he definitely writes the city into the novel as an integral part of the action. And then Dostoevsky loved French literature, and so he publishes Crime and Punishment in 1866. Well, 1862 was the publication of Les Miserables, and Paris of Victor Hugo is such a complex and integral part of everything that happens to the characters. I mean, you can like do a tour of Paris today where you still encounter all of the locations of Les Miserables. And it's the same with all of the novels of Honoré de Balzac. And we read just one thing by Balzac, Colonel Chabert, which was so much fun. So we need to read more Balzac. But I've gone through maybe like 10, 15 of his novels, and they're so incredibly depressing that we need uplifting literature like Crime and Punishment, because this is not depressing at all. So Dostoevsky learns how to integrate the geography of the city into his novel from well, Dumas has his Paris too, but the gutter of Paris, the nitty-gritty darkness of Paris from Victor Hugo and from Balzac, and then the darkness of London from Charles Dickens. And you can see the locations that he mentions of St. Petersburg, especially at the very beginning. We start the novel on Stolyarny Pereulok on the Kukushkin Most, and I stood on the spot when the novel begins, and it's just a surreal experience. And then you can actually walk the walk of Raskolnikov to Haymarket Square. So and then that moment where he is standing on the bridge over the Neva River, and he can see the Winter Palace, and he can see the Isaac Cathedral, and this focusing on a city to which he does not belong, focusing on a city that rejects him as an individual human being, finally is the thing that sets him on his murderous path. And so all of these characters, the interplay of the characters is so important. And then we have a character who also comes in from the provinces, and that's Svidrigailov. So Svidrigailov is one of the most crucial characters in the novel, because he is the double of Raskolnikov. So Raskolnikov, we live in his mind, and he explains to us why he thinks the way he thinks, and then he encounters like an actual real life embodiment of his idea. He finally comes to the conclusion that the people who were considered great men of history, like Napoleon Bonaparte, and there's so many references to Napoleon in Crime and Punishment, they overstepped their own humanity and never worried about a squashed louse. Because the thing that they valued most in their life is the ultimate greater good. So what they created for humanity was so much more important than a few lives that were lost in the process of acquiring this incredible transcendent moment for all. And it was worth it. So stepping over human beings, stepping over human lives was worth it because the goal at hand was so important. And students sometimes think that that's exactly what Dostoevsky thinks. And so I have to disenchant them and tell them that that is completely contrary to what Dostoevsky thinks, because Dostoevsky feels that this kind of unhinged hubris is going to be the death of humanity. But Dostoevsky uses Napoleon Bonaparte as the example that is appealing to Raskolnikov's understanding of what he needs to do in this world in order to assert his will. And all of that is so theoretical, right? It's just so wonderful to think in theories about how you will step over your own humanity to be the master of men. And then he encounters Svidrigailov, who is completely blatantly cynical about how he uses human beings for his own benefit. How does Marfa find this gorgeous specimen of humanity? She buys him from a debtor's prison. That is the most unique courtship in all of literature. I don't know any other marriage in any literary work that is based on a woman just walking into a debtor's prison and saying, well, you have such interesting human beings here. Show me what you've got. And she just like looks at all of these men, and then she looks at Svidrigailov and she's like, I like, how much? And she actually then bargains with the jail because he owes something like 70,000 rubles and she pays 30,000, and they're like, yeah, good enough. Nobody else will pay more for him. And then she just takes him to her estate. And he says, I was a model husband for 7 years. I beat her only twice, once at the beginning to like show her who's boss, and this last, and there may have been another altercation. I mean, he says the most horrific things, but he is like charming and suave and sophisticated and fresh and exciting and interesting. And we're horrified by him. But what's more, Raskolnikov sees how his theories about being above human beings and how you're going to be like bettering humanity if you can be above human beings because your ideas are going to pull humanity forward. When implemented in reality, they're horrific. And so that's where Svidrigailov comes in. And Svidrigailov is essential for our understanding of Raskolnikov as a character. Once my students gave me the nicest present ever. They somewhere in a used bookstore found Dostoevsky's notes for Crime and Punishment. And they were published in the US, and I absolutely treasure that little volume. But what the students said, what fascinated them the most as they read this is the struggle in Dostoevsky's mind about who is the hero of this novel, Svidrigailov or Raskolnikov. Because if Raskolnikov is the theory of being above human beings, Svidrigailov is the embodiment of being above human beings. He's above morality. He's above the law. Yeah, he probably murdered his wife, but there's no official confirmation. Do you see how Raskolnikov, there's no official confirmation that Raskolnikov murdered the two women, right? They're not even circumstantial evidence, right? There's nothing, absolutely nothing. And that is what bewilders Porfiry Petrovich, the investigator. And Svidrigailov is readily admitting, yeah, she probably drank too much, She had a stroke. Was it exacerbated by what I've done to her? Maybe, maybe not. Who can tell? There are no witnesses. And so both of them are murderers, beasts. But Raskolnikov sees, in the case of Svidrigailov, how those kinds of ideas about being above the law, being above your own humanity, overstepping the bounds, when released into the world, are not benefiting humanity at all. They're just causing deaths. And so Svidrigailov's introduction into this whole plot is essential for our understanding of Raskolnikov. And the way Svidrigailov is played in the ballet, it was just stunning. I mean, the stage is split into two spaces by one of those moving walls, and there's one human being in one room and two human beings in the other room. And Sonia just dancing beautifully with a gospel. And in the ballet, the book is definitely marked with a cross. And she's constantly leaning towards Raskolnikov and saying, like, you know, you're a sinner, but you are a human being. You were created in the image of God. Your sin is the sin of your thinking. It's not a sin of you as a human being. And it is just incredible. And then Svidrigailov standing completely alone because he has no connection with humanity. He has severed himself from humanity, and he has no thoughts of sin or redemption. And some readers are having a hard time with this novel also because it's a very Christian novel. It is an incredibly Christian novel. I mean, we go through the resurrection of Lazarus, and Dostoevsky really felt that he himself is that Lazarus. That when he was, and so like when he was condemned to death, there were swords broken over them, meaning that they were completely, I mean, the breaking of the sword over a human being signified their severing of all relationship with the world before their execution. He was facing the firing squad because of the thoughts that he had. He has not committed a murder. And Dostoevsky really felt that the fact that he was given a second chance, that there was no firing, and we'll be reading like his thoughts about what a human being feels before facing a firing squad at the very beginning of The Idiot. Dostoevsky felt that he was given a second chance, and he was squandering that second chance. I mean, he was not a model human being in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you are reading my notes about his life. I mean, 4 years of hard labor and then 4 years of being a guard in Siberia. I mean, the catastrophic marriage, wife dying. He was not a model husband. He was not a model stepfather. His whole love affair was Apollinaria Suslova, which then turns into the novel, I have it right here somewhere, the novel, The Gambler, and it's also the double. It's a dual edition. All of those things brought him finally to writing Crime and Punishment. And he really believed that if he wouldn't have been stopped by his arrest and his imprisonment and his hard labor service, his ideas would have evolved to get him to where Raskolnikov ends up in the novel. So The Underground Man is an extension of Dostoevsky's thinking, but also Raskolnikov is an extension of Dostoevsky. I mean, this type of thinking of you being above human beings and above human judgment and above human law and above your own humanity in order to advance your ideas that would benefit humanity is such a dangerous way of thinking that Dostoevsky writes an entire novel that exposes his flawed and anti-human way of coping with reality when he was a young man. And so he's condemning himself in this book. This is his confession. This is his way of saying, I am that person. This was my way of thinking. And if they wouldn't have stopped me, God knows what horrors my thought process would have caused. And that's why this novel is so hard to deal with, because we have a murderer who is appealing, and Dostoevsky can't make him unappealing because he is an extension of himself. And Raskolnikov has to be like, he's charming, he's very attractive, he's tall, he's handsome. he is boundlessly interesting. I mean, he thinks in such incredibly complex ways. We find him intriguing because he is an extension of Dostoevsky, and his doubling with Svidrigailov, like, watch out for that. Because Dostoevsky will examine through this interplay between Svidrigailov and Raskolnikov, the split between one character theorizing about the possibility of being above the law for the sake of humanity, and another character who is above the law, not for the sake of humanity, because it's a self-serving mechanism for him. And so then Dostoevsky asked the question, so those thinkers and movers of humanity who say that they are overstepping the boundaries of what is allowable for human beings for the sake of human beings, end up being self-serving. Watch out for that, says Dostoevsky. Watch out for human beings who will come into your life and will say to you that they are doing these great deeds for humanity that are criminal, but they're going to benefit humanity. But then you will realize that they're actually self-serving jerks who sell the great lie in order to exonerate their own criminality. And that's exactly what Dostoevsky already talked about in Notes from Underground, where he says conscience. If somebody can come in who will say, you are not going to have any pangs of conscience, you are going to be free from guilt, and you are going to ascend to being above human beings, you're going to be born out of an idea, that is what terrifies Dostoevsky so much. So can't tell you more because we don't know how the novel resolves, but this being born out of an idea is a terrifying, terrifying thought for Dostoevsky. And so I always suggest that you go back and read the last page of Notes from Underground, and I suggest that you do it again, because that is sort of the blueprint of where Dostoevsky will be headed in each one of his grade 5 novels. And he will go back to that horror of a human being being born not out of their own human nature, but out of an idea that will allow them to transgress human nature and commit crimes that they feel are justifiable because they are bettering humanity, as Napoleon did. Yay. Can't give you more now. So this was fun, but not easy. Dostoevsky is not easy. And we will have another discussion when we get to the end of the novel. And we are very close, very, very close to the moment when Dostoevsky meets his wife. So I really wanted to, I gave you those 5 extra posts on The Gambler and Dostoevsky's meeting with his wife on October 4, and then the fact that he submitted the novel before November 1, and that novel was The Gambler. And we are almost there in Crime and Punishment. So we are almost there, and you will see, I mean, there's just like a magical click that happens in the novel where you realize this was written by a man who is falling in love. You will literally know when it happens. And that's why there's an epilogue in the novel. And he could not, like right now where we are in the novel in book 5, he doesn't know how the novel ends. And we talked about that because some of you read the afterword of Turgenev, To Fathers and Sons, where he's saying, like, I didn't know how my characters will behave. I created these characters and then they acquired a life of their own. And it was my duty as a responsible writer to allow them to evolve and resolve themselves. And some of you were just so struck by that. Well, that is exactly how Dostoevsky wrote his characters. He does not know at this point in the novel how the novel will be resolved. And that's why we're so thrilled as readers, because we are looking for answers and there are no answers. It's because Dostoevsky has no answers yet. These characters need to resolve themselves, and he will allow them to come to a conclusion that is consistent with consistent with who they are and who they evolved to so far. So any questions?
Anna, it's Maureen. I have a question. Thank God for part 4, chapter 5, where Porphyry is sitting with Raskolnikov, and that whole, 20 pages,
Yeah.
that was some comic relief for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it was fabulous.
Yes. And isn't that funny how Dostoevsky sets up that chapter? The two of them just kind of tumble into space like a couple of toddlers giggling. And sometimes I have students who just burst into the classroom and they're still like continuing the laughter that was happening.
Yes.
Like they had a conversation in the corridor and then they tumble into the classroom still laughing. Dostoevsky captures that so well. I mean, young people are just so full of life and zest and charm and delight. But then in the course of that conversation, Razumihin just starts looking at the two of them and saying, have you lost your minds? I mean, what are you talking about? And, you're wondering, like, when does Razumihin know? And there's that moment where Dostoevsky tells us, and he became their son and brother. And I lose it every time I get to that moment because, Raskolnikov all of a sudden, like, he severed himself from humanity, and then he severed himself from his family, and that happens to people, and that's a terrifying moment. And so for Razumihin to come in and be the stand-in for a brother and a son, it's a terrifying moment, but at the same time, you feel like the three of them will need it because Razumihin loves Raskolnikov, and Pulcheria loves her son, and Dunichka loves her brother. For them to be losing him and be alone, you should not be alone in this world. This is a novel about what Dostoevsky is saying. To be alone in this world is terrifying, and to be above human beings is terrifying, and to sever yourself from humanity is terrifying. And Raskolnikov's name means Raskol, schism. He's a schismatic. He cuts himself away from everyone willingly because of his ideas. And Dostoevsky is saying, just like the connection between mother and son and brother and sister, those are human things. He should have held on to that, but instead he severs himself from that too. And Razumihin, who hilariously, his name comes from razum, mind, rational thinking, he steps into the role of a human being for the mother and the sister. And that resolution is very comforting for me because Raskolnikov needs to go somewhere and do something, and we are not there yet. And those of you who haven't read the novel ever before, you are in for some mind-boggling revelations. That's the only way to describe it. But Porfiry is hilarious. He just says, oh, you have some thoughts. Tell me about your thoughts. Your thoughts are just the best, but I'm just bewildered by them. Could you explain your thoughts to me? And Raskolnikov is not shy. Why? Because his thinking is all of a sudden recognized as of significance. It's just like he lived in his mind for so long, and here's a human being who is listening to what he has to say. And it's a triumph for Raskolnikov. Look at us, all of us thinkers. Look at me. I'm just talking to you right now. I just talked to you for an hour, and you are still listening to me. It is so exciting. Do you see what I'm doing here? Raskolnikov is an intellectual. Dostoevsky is in so many ways writing a novel about us talkers and writers, because we can get to the point where we feel that what we say and what we write is essential for our extension of our hubris into humanity, that we matter, that we're important, that people listen to us and we make a difference. And Dostoevsky says that is such a terrifying thing. It's best to be human instead of just this fountain of wisdom that imposes itself on other human beings. It's such a superbly smart intellectual, anti-intellectual book. And Dostoevsky knows full well that he is expressing these ideas in a book. He understands full well that he's a published author, just like Raskolnikov. And remember, there'll be another published author in another Dostoevsky novel, Ivan Karamazov. Those of you who read Brothers Karamazov with me, he published a little thing. He's a journalist, and his Grand Inquisitor is a little poem that he wrote, right? So Dostoevsky is constantly cautioning us against overthinking reality. Like, at one point, I just can't go there yet. I'm so on the cusp of telling you how it all ends. I have to, it's like with Dostoevsky novels, it's torture to be at midpoint and explain to students. And, we come back and we do about 300 pages a week, and students come back and I tell them, we are just going to kill 3 hours right now with me not telling you what matters, because when you get to the end, you're going to have an epiphany of the mind that Dostoevsky wants you to then convert into the epiphany of your soul. And he gets you to the epiphany of the soul by getting to you through your thinking, because you are reading thinking individual of the 19th century. You value so much your ability to rationalize things. And I am going to take you there, and without condemning your ability to rationalize, I'm going to reconnect you with your soul. No easy task. So that is Dostoevsky. I was so close. I was so close to actually giving it all away to you, because it has something to do with Porphyry. So there's another hand. Do you have another question?
No, I was clapping. Thank
Okay.
you.
So yes, it's watch Porphyry, obviously, and watch Sonichka. I'm going to start crying, and I don't want to cry because I put on my theater makeup. I'm off to hear Mozart, but Sonichka Marmeladova is little splinter of heaven in the here and now. And Dostoevsky will ask the question over and over and over again in his novels: if Christ could be here now, what would be his manifestation in this world? And note that Sonichka Marmeladova is a prostitute. I strongly suggest that you look up the connection between Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene as a sort of prerequisite to our future discussion, and how Raskolnikov says to her, I thought I'll come to you even before I met you. When your father, in his drunken stupor, was telling me about his daughter who did this to herself, he says, you laid your hands on yourself. You have defiled your sanctity as a human being. I knew that eventually I'll come to you if I commit a crime. I mean, it's so shocking. It's like, I was talking to your dad, he was drunk, he told me about you, and I knew then that if ever I need someone to talk to, it will be you. And he comes to her, and she says to him, what have you done? Like, why are you here? And I just almost gave it away to, oh! So watch Sonichka. Start thinking of what forgiveness, repentance, and transcendence means in this world where it's so hard to talk about repentance and transcendence. Think about how hard it is for us to say, I'm sorry. It's impossible. That's basically all of the novels of Dostoevsky, our complete inability to express intellectual humility, let's just put it this way. And watch Porphyry and Sonia. And I can't tell you more because I would be giving it all away, and you need to get there on your own. So I'm going to comment on another chapter after Mozart today. We don't have too many chapters left. I mean, we are almost at the end of book 5. So we have book 6, and that's where, prepare for, if you've never read Crime and Punishment before, just your mind and your soul are going to communicate. Something will be happening. You will be exploding. You will be saying no, and you'll be saying yes at the same time. And you will be wondering, how did Dostoevsky do it? I mean, how did he resolve and connect and reach all of us with so much wisdom? And then I need to write the announcement for Yoko Imor for the spring. We'll read 2 novels. They're both short, but we'll read 2 novels. One about, so Dostoevsky was a byproduct of what happened in 1848 in Europe. Yoko Imor, that will be the connection because he was on the barricades in 1848. And then I think the second novel we'll read, we'll go to Transylvania, and we're going to go to the Ottoman Empire and its rule over Southern Europe. And we are going to go, I think, into the 17th century. So then it'll be really easy for us to switch to the 17th century of part 2, or the first sequel to the Three Musketeers. So I'm still trying to like work it all out in my mind, but I think that will be fun. And then we're going to read all of Dostoevsky. So we'll read The Idiot, we'll read Demons, we'll read Adolescent, we'll read Brothers Karamazov. Again, having acquired all the wisdom that we're acquiring through reading all of the novels, and then we'll read some of the shorter works of Dostoevsky as well. So definitely at some point we'll read The Gambler and The Double and connect them, like fill in the all of the important gaps in our understanding. So have fun reading, and we're going to reconnect in December. I'll see those of you who are close to Minneapolis during my talk at Tamora. And then if you are close to Iowa City, we'll be doing the French adaptation of Crime and Punishment, the Robert Bresson film, Pickpocket, on December 12th. And I'll be posting all of the stuff on all of our pages. So 3 cheers and goodbye. Happy reading. It will be amazing. I guarantee it.